Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Bloomy Brain Podcast, where you come to water and nourish your brain, in turn seeing your mind, body, and spirit bloom. Today, I'm just going to be honest with you guys. It's a Friday afternoon. I was just crying, having a mental breakdown 2 hours ago. A lot is going on, but you know what? We choose victor, not victim. And sometimes when I watch my episodes back, I don't want to say they're lacking a level of realism. They're absolutely not, but I feel like they highlight a lot of the good in my life. So I wanted to be transparent with you all today and share this because this episode with my guest is going to be so special, and the fact that we're able to finally make this work. I mean, on top of that, he literally flies out at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. So everybody welcome Bernie Ervin too, before I get all into this. How are you doing today?
Good. How's it going, everyone?
I'm excited you're here. But yeah, you guys, him and I have been trying to make this episode happen for a long time. As I mentioned, he flies out at 6 a.m. He lives in Boston because he is attending Harvard, and when some stuff came up today, car issues, and I thought that we weren't going to be able to do it, I just wanted to give up. But that is not what this podcast is about. And when you break promises to yourself that you have made, that can diminish your confidence. So we showed up today and we are going to do this and give you guys an incredible episode. So yeah, thank you just so much again for being here. I'm so happy that we get to do this, but why don't you start with telling the audience a little bit about yourself, what you've been up to, and all that good jazz?
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I want to say, first of all, it's a pleasure. Always a pleasure connecting with you. And I'm excited to, share some insights and connect with each other.
Yeah.
So a little bit about me. As Carly said, my name is Bernie. I was in the military for a little while. Was in MARSOC, focusing on intelligence mostly. Decided to transition out of there, which I think we'll get into a little bit later. Mm-hmm. Started to go to school at Harvard, where I study neuroscience, specifically to help mental health, people who struggle with PTSD, depression, anxiety, trying to find ways to really kind of give a quality of life to people who struggle with mental health.
Yeah.
And on my free time, I enjoy photography. I DJ a bit on the side. I love electronic music. You can find me at music festivals most of the time.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I love how busy and active you are. And I also love that your passion feeds your purpose and vice versa. Like what you study does stem from your past. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So it's interesting because, like I said, I spent a decent amount of time in the military, about 13 years.
Wow.
And so when I was getting ready to go to school, the question I get asked a lot when you go through the admissions process is, why now? Like, why are you transitioning out of the military? You have a career. Why are you transitioning? And so for me, it stemmed from, I think it was my second deployment to Iraq. And I was sitting there, you're just going through a lot. Some of your friends aren't coming home because they're not making it back because they just don't make it back. And then you start asking, like, why are we fighting this war? Like, why are we here? And, the mantra they say in the Marine Corps is, you're fighting for freedom. And, you believe that. You drink the Kool-Aid. You put yourself through a lot to fight for freedom. And then I kind of realized that, like, we're fighting for freedom, but people back home aren't truly free, right? They're not able to live the life they want to live through either like economic obstacles or mental health obstacles. And so I was like, I don't feel like I'm fighting the right war. And so that kind of stemmed this whole like transition process.
Wow.
Where I was like, okay, I want to do something different. I want to help people with mental health because I struggled with that briefly.
Yeah.
And I want to give people an opportunity to really shine the way they want to shine.
That is so beautiful. I mean, I have full body chills right now. I just want to take it back for a moment to you saying, I am not fighting the right war, because here you are, literally and figuratively fighting a war. But I think that is something that so many people can apply to their own lives and what they're doing. Are they fulfilled in it? And you feel it in your heart and soul if it's not the right place or the right time. And that doesn't even have to be a job. It can be a relationship too. So I think that that is just so profound that you knew that in your heart, like, hey, my time here is up, and now I'm going to focus on where the next fire is. Like, I'm going to chase that fire in my heart, because you know, what fun would it be if we're not, you know, living passionately on fire and invigorated by life and what we're doing. And, you know, just before the episode started, we were kind of talking a little bit about that, and I was seeking counsel from you because, I mean, I just look up to you so much. You've accomplished an immense amount for someone your age, and I think you're incredible. And I was sharing, you know, you guys, as the viewers know, you've heard me talk about it on here, that I used to do hair full time, but kind of had to chase the direction that I felt my heart and soul pulling me in, which is writing and monetizing a little bit on my creativity still, but in a different realm, because doing hair is still very creative, but I just, you know, felt called to do something else. And it's cool too. I think we connect on a level of, we're both passionate about mental health. That was how I initially got into everything, was after my dad passed to suicide. The mental health and wellness blog came to fruition, and it has little, you know, tidbits of lifestyle and travel in there, and beauty tips and tricks as well. So it's really fun, and it has brought me a lot of joy. So I love that we can connect on that topic. But what would you say your own mental health was like when you were serving our country?
Yeah, so I hit rock bottom in 2016, I would say. Was going through a divorce at the time. My self-worth and myself kind of just like was completely shattered. Mm-hmm. And I remember I just didn't want to go on, kind of just like wanted to quit on everything. And I had a friend who ended up, funny enough, they called my command because they were worried about me, because they thought I was going to do something drastic to myself, which was very well warranted. So I was frustrated because, you know, they call the command and then you get them put on like, you know, suicide watch and things like that.
Wow, yeah.
And that kind of was eye-opening for me, because I had people, like, I could tell that people cared about me,
yeah,
you know, and that meant a lot. And then I realized, I was like, I don't want anyone to feel the way that I'm feeling. Like, no one should have to feel alone.
Yeah.
And I had a really close friend, Austin. He was a DJ now, but he was like, hey, I know you're going through a rough time. I know you enjoy music. You should take this little DJ mixer and, you know, mix some music. And I had no idea what a mixer was, right?
Yeah.
So here I am in my house trying to mix music. Horrible. Like, I can't even switch songs. It was horrible. But it brought me a level of peace, and it brought me happiness. And I was like, okay, this is making me happy. What if it helps other people become happy?
Yeah. So
I started like recording videos of me mixing, which was, when I look back at them today, I'm like, man, that was so bad. But people are like, hey, I really enjoy that. Like, it's making me, you know, bringing me happiness.
Yeah.
And so that kind of like pursued, and I kept doing that. And then kind of the goal was just like, I want people to feel like happy. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how my struggle with mental health kind of went a little bit higher up. Mm-hmm. And then I guess probably soon we'll talk a little bit more about the medical side of the mental health as well, if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, from there, tell me a little bit about your journey in transitioning into this new life and going to school, and where things have gone, how you've been able to kind of pursue what you're passionate about while you're in school.
Yeah.
Real quick, bring the mic just a little closer to your mouth.
There we go.
Almost like kiss it.
Okay, yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. Is that better?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. Yeah, so a little bit about my transition process and the journey. Definitely getting out of the military was very hard. You know, you develop this camaraderie with your brothers and sisters who you all relate. You have inside jokes, you know everything about each other. And then you just get uprooted from that, and you're just kind of like in the real world. and you don't feel connected with people like you did in the military. So you quickly start to feel alone, and you don't have people you can normally call and like tell jokes to. So you're learning this new lifestyle, as you will. So being on campus at Harvard, where you have all these people who are like super smart, you have like imposter syndrome because these kids have been studying subjects since they were 6 years old.
Wow.
And I'm like, what am I doing here? But yeah, you're there. I find like the vet community there. We start bonding and connecting over the similar struggle. And through that process, I was like, I want to focus on mental health. What are kind of the new things going on in mental health? And one of the things came up was psychedelics.
Yeah.
And Harvard, as most people don't know this, has a really strong like psychedelic study and research facility. And I was like, this is wild. You know what I mean? So,
is that how you got into it? Was because of stumbling upon it at Harvard?
So that's how I got into it from maybe like a research perspective. I definitely like experienced it like on my own at one point in time, like at a younger age.
Yeah.
But that's just like, when you drink and stuff, you do it with friends and parties and stuff. But then when you get there and you learn that it can be used as medicinal, you're just like, what?
Yeah, it's almost like there's been a paradigm shift, and we're living in this new reality where these things that we've looked at with negative connotations for so long. I mean, Nixon's war on drugs in the 60s is one of the biggest reasons, as I'm sure you know, that the research really wasn't picked up until like almost a decade ago, up until now.
Mm-hmm. Due to the MAPS, Rick Doblin, he really pushed, and interesting enough, he did a whole thesis on how to get something FDA approved. That's what he did his thesis on. And then he started the organization MAPS, which focuses on psychedelics, and their process was getting the psychedelics FDA approved. But yeah, you're 100% right.
Yeah. It's insane. So do you want to share a little bit of your experiences with psychedelics and maybe how that has helped you with that? I don't know, maybe PTSD even, your mental health just in general?
Yeah. So I guess before that, I should probably add a little more color to like my mental health struggle. So I apologize. Let me add a little more. So when I got out of the military, I was diagnosed with depression, anxiety, PTSD, ADHD, and so I was on a plethora of medications, and I was like, I just stopped taking them because you would take medication for like a side effect, and then it was a whole mess. Yeah. So I stopped taking the medication, and then as I learned about psychedelics, I looked at the research papers of how these are being prescribed in like a medical kind of way, like how do they go about doing it? And so read the research papers and basically set up a little mini clinical trial in my own house. And so I ended up taking, what was it at the time? Took psilocybin, and it was very eye-opening. I remember during the trip process, I was at my own funeral, which was very, very crazy. And I'm at my funeral, I could see my body, and I'm in my like military dress blues. Whoa. And all my friends and family that I still have were there at my funeral, just there looking at me. And as I'm looking at myself, I hear this voice, and this voice says, no matter what you do, you won't be able to bring your mom back. And my mom passed away when I was 7 years old, and I felt like that was so eye-opening because since she passed away, I felt like I kept trying to be this perfectionist. I'm always driving for something, trying to be successful. Yeah. And I realized that in some level I was doing it because I wanted her to be proud of me. Yeah. And that, I remember just like bawling my eyes out and hearing that. And it was so eye-opening. And I'm like, I just need to let go and just be myself and let go. Yeah. And so, having that experience and then journaling about it and like marinating on that for a bit, just kind of started this healing process of like finding these deep wounds that I had within myself that I was learning to let go and learning to navigate around. So yeah,
that is all just so eloquently put. So thank you for sharing that with us and with the audience and everyone. Wow. What would you say are a few things upon trying the psilocybin that really surprised you, whether physically or through research? I know that one thing that may come as a surprise to people is psilocybin, magic mushrooms. They're non-addictive because of the dopamine receptors?
Yeah. So usually when we look at addictiveness, it has to do with the amount of dopamine that's released, right? And so with the brain, you have this desire to want to have homeostasis. So when you take a substance and it releases a large amount of dopamine, like a extreme amount, your body responds with like not bringing you back to level, but bringing you back as low as you were high. So if you had like 100, if the dopamine hit was like 100, right? Your brain will respond by putting you at a negative 100. And it's that drop that causes something to be addictive because you feel this low and then you want to drive to feel normal again. And so the beauty of like LSD or psilocybin is that they don't hit the dopamine receptors in that way like it would with like alcohol or gambling or pornography. It focuses more on the serotonin receptors, and so it's less addictive, and that's more of like the biological aspect. But then you have like a psychological non-addictive property, which, you know, when you take a psychedelic, you know, you have a very intense experience, and very rarely after that intense experience are you like, I want to do more, right? Like it's like you need time to process what you just been through. You know, it was an eye-opening experience, and you're like, I need a moment. So it's two sides.
Yeah, God, that's incredible. And that just is so interesting to me about the receptors bringing you. If you went up to an 100, they're going to bring you to back down to a negative 100. I mean, it makes me think, we were talking the other week, I gave up alcohol again just because it's fun to celebrate with and everything, but it's nice to do like a good cleanse every now and again and really get your system back. And I had been feeling that my dopamine receptors, just between social media, going out, alcohol, like all of the things, have just been a little off. So I've been trying to draw back. So it makes me think about how someone explained to me, oh yeah, you know, if you're hungover and you have a little hair of the dog the next day, you drink a little bit more alcohol, you're so low that it will almost bring you back to stable.
Yeah.
So interesting. And it's interesting that they don't have addictive properties. And I know, from the book that I read, the Microdosing Guidebook, it talks a lot about people actually beating other addictions. So what do you have to say about that? Have you read anything cool or researched anything cool with that?
Yeah. I want to say first, because you did ask a really good question about, you know, what's something I learned about psychedelics or from my own experience through research. I think one of the most eye-opening things was, I think in our society, we put alcohol kind of like at this normalcy, like, hey, if you're having a bad day, take a drink, have a hard day at work, drink a beer or a glass of wine. It was really understanding that alcohol, which is a drug, you know, ethanol is a drug, is more harmful than like LSD and psilocybin. So to me, it took a long time of wrestling with the data on that and being like, this can't be. And so that was probably like very just like, whoa, eye-opening. But to go back to your most recent question about just, actually, can you say it again? Sorry.
No, you're good. About psilocybin or psychedelics in general, helping people to beat addiction.
Yes. Okay. So what's very interesting with this, with the psychedelics, is basically this term we throw around called neuroplasticity.
Yes.
And so neuroplasticity is the ability for the brain to learn new things. So when you're a kid, you know, we actually have twice the amount of neurons that we will actually have as an adult. Just gives you the ability just to be very flexible in what you learn. As a kid, you can learn new languages, and it's so easy. Well, as we get older, those neural pathways become like a little more hardened, and they're less likely to be pliable and for you to be able to learn new things. And it's kind of like a survival. You know, you learn as a young kid, and so as you get older, you're spending less time learning and more time making decisions based off of what you already know. And the issue with that is that if you went through a traumatic experience, that's being learned in the brain, and that's part of the wiring. And the more you go through a traumatic experience, the harder those connections become and the stronger they become. And that's how learning kind of occurs. And so I think the best metaphor for neuroplasticity is, imagine you're at a ski resort and you see a mountain and there's like a lot of snow there, and you have, you know, ski prints going down the slopes, And the more someone goes down the ski prints, the deeper they become. And that's kind of how your brain works. The more you do something, the deeper it becomes. And what neuroplasticity allows, or the psychedelics, it's like taking a small layer of snow off and allowing those like pathways to become a little more equal. And so now your brain, the neurons fire, they can go down different pathways. And it's something you may not notice like completely consciously, but if someone cuts you off and you normally get really mad, you might just be like, You kind of explore with more curiosity than with the judgment that you had initially. Yeah. And that's the way the neuroplasticity of it works.
Yeah, I've actually heard this example before and I love it. And when I tell it to people, I always like to say, if you've been taking the bunny slopes, get ready for the blues, baby.
Black diamond, let's go.
Right. Yeah, it's also interesting to me. Was there anything, well, I know in your research group, you said that everybody has something different that like makes them passionate about the topic. And you told me yours was being in the military and just never wanting people to feel how you once felt. But you said that your group is pretty diverse and there's people from all backgrounds and that are interested in it in different facets as well. What are some of those like interests from other people that intrigue you?
Yeah, I think when we look at, if you took our group, so we have the Harvard Psychedelics Club, there's usually like three main facets. You kind of have the medical view, which people focusing on, mental health and, learning new things and being open-minded. Yeah. And then the second facet is more kind of like spirituality. So people who have like religious beliefs and they want to explore more spirituality and get in touch and tune with their energy. And we have people like that, which is really fascinating to see. Yeah. I've been kind of diving into that a little bit here and there. And then the third facet is more recreational. So people who just want to experiment just because they want to learn more about themselves or they just want to see the world through a different light. And there's really no true agenda or other than just like enjoying oneself and being in the moment.
I love that. It makes me think of the book, The Power of Now.
I love that book. Yeah.
Such a great one. Yeah, just focusing on being present because the present moment is truly all that we have. I wanted to ask you, it just came to my mind. Is there like particularly just an absurd realization or revelation that has ever come to you while using psychedelics, let's just say psilocybin, for instance, that almost brought you into a point of cognitive dissonance? Like, no, this can't, like you almost grappled with it rather than fully accepting it. Yeah. Because I feel like when you're on them, it is so easy to fully accept and be like, oh, this is what it is. This is the truth. Wow. Oh my God. And it just is clear codes straight through all of the BS. There's the answer. And a lot of people say that they like to do them when they're in search or in seek of answers. But have you ever done them and struggled to maybe get what you were hoping for?
Yeah. This was, I think it was my last semester. So it was like in May, finishing up final exams, and I ended up doing like mushrooms because I was like, I need some clarity. Yeah.
Before the exams?
This was after the exams.
After the exams,
so
okay.
School year was kind of over, and I was like, I want some clarity. And so I take these mushrooms, and I'm, how do I explain it? I was like in this maze / puzzle thing. Like I was running around trying to get out of this maze, and I kept like getting stuck, I'm like running around and I just couldn't figure it out. And then finally it was kind of like the thing that's trapping you in this thing is yourself. It was like you were creating your own problems. And that was like, I was like, what do you mean I'm creating my own problems? Like, the ego comes out and I'm like, that's not, like, it's not my problems. Like the world is putting problems on me. I'm being oppressed by the world. Yeah. And so I kind of had to take like self-ownership and be like, okay, what parts of my life am I creating my own friction points? Yeah. And so that took a little bit of, massaging that ego and just like taking that piece of humble pie and realizing that like, we own our own lives and we can make our own decisions and be the architect of our own lives.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think that that's so good for people to hear because I do feel like sometimes it takes the mental work of coming in with an open heart and an open mind to fully receive the gift of the tool of the magic mushrooms that you are using. Now, what do you think we can expect in the future for this, type of naturopathic way of life that people are kind of turning to now, rather than pharmaceuticals and pills to kind of suppress what they're feeling? What do you think the future holds?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Let me check my magic ball here.
Yeah, right.
I would say, the research supports the science very, very well for MDMA specifically, psilocybin specifically being used as a therapeutic. And so you have both of these substances being on FDA phase 3 trials. So give it a year or two and a doctor will be able to prescribe this type of medication.
So interesting.
In fact, so this summer I was doing an internship with consulting, and one of the cases was working with the MAPS organization to help them, basically once it's FDA approved, how do you bring this to market? What is that going to look like and that kind of thing. So that's definitely going to be happening to the point where, you'll go to a doctor and they'll prescribe MDMA, but you'll go through therapy, right? They're not just going to say, here's MDMA, have a good day. You'll go see a therapist, and the therapist will prescribe it and walk you through kind of that aspect. And then I would say the other thing, which is kind of gaining traction, and something like I've been researching and my thesis will be on, is the effects. Like if we lived in a world where all drugs were legal, right? Let's just put on our pretend hat, and all drugs were legal, including alcohol, which is legal.
Yeah.
And you had to basically classify drugs on their danger based off of what they do to the brain and the body, then which drugs would become illegal and which ones would become legal. And when you look at it through that lens, alcohol is by far the most dangerous drug that we have. And so
neurotoxin
and carcinogenic. And so I would say if you give it, say 10 or 15 years, we'll see alcohol the way we see cigarettes now. Because if you go back 30, 40 years, you can smoke everywhere. Hotels, trains, everyone was smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
And now, someone pulls out a cigarette and you're like, whoa, it's such a taboo.
Yeah. God, yeah, that's insane. And I actually have two things that I want to say based on what you just said. So I want to know if this example is as preposterous as it sometimes sounds coming out of my mouth, because I don't think that it's that far off. But when I say it to people, they have to pick their jaws up off the floor.
Okay.
So think about this. Alcohol is a neurotoxin. Botox is a neurotoxin. If you are drinking alcohol every single day, is that somewhat comparable to getting a little bit of Botox every single day, because they're both neurotoxins? I mean, I know obviously alcohol is not going to freeze your face, but I do think that the side effects can, paralysis can certainly be a side effect of alcohol.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. I don't know if I would draw those two parallels.
Yeah.
But let's walk through what alcohol does to the body and explore it together.
Okay.
But I don't know a lot about Botox, so
yeah.
So
and I'm not saying anything bad about Botox, anything like I'm literally just pulling so this doesn't get flagged or upset anyone. I'm really just pulling from knowing that both of them are a neurotoxin, but alcohol is something that a lot of people drink every day, and Botox is something that people get 2-3 times a year, so that's where obviously they're very different, but hearing neurotoxin, it does make you wonder.
Yeah. So let's walk through, which I love. I love talking to science.
Yeah.
So alcohol, which makes alcohol actually dangerous, is the ethanol inside of alcohol. So when we drink it, it's the ethanol that is converted to this chemical called acetaldehyde. And it's in that state, that's the dangerous state of alcohol. So you take it, you drink it, right? Your body breaks it down, goes through the bloodstream, it's converted to acetaldehyde, and then that is the dangerous piece.
After it's broken down
After it's broken down. This is phase 1. Yeah.
Okay.
And so there's a specific gene, I want to say it's the ALD2 gene, I might be missing a letter there,
Yeah.
That gene is responsible for basically breaking down the toxic part, the acetaldehyde. And so depending on your genetics, if the longer it stays within that form, the acetaldehyde, the more dangerous alcohol becomes. And typically, like in Asian cultures, they have like a less degree of that gene. So typically alcohol really affects them really badly. They get flushed in the face, bad hangovers. But for a lot of like, right. And for some like African cultures, they have a high dose of that specific gene, so they can drink and just kind of be
of course
not as bad. Yeah,
have all the good genes.
So it's really that state, that particular chemical is what's dangerous. And that chemical can interfere with DNA and cause mutations to make it kind of a carcinogenic. And so it's a little bit, I'd say, hard to compare it to Botox, because I think that it goes different pathways. It's like locally injected. But that's kind of like the gist of why alcohol is so bad. And then when it gets into your brain, it really shrinks kind of like the memory portion of your brain. And that's the neurotoxicity that people usually refer to.
Wow.
Sorry, I know that was a lot. I apologize.
No, oh my gosh. I'm like, like my brain is juicing over here.
Yeah.
No, it's so interesting. I used that example one time. I was like, it can't be that far off, but obviously it's an extreme example. So thank you for breaking that down for me. I feel like I'm going to listen to this part about alcohol again and again and again. But going back to something else you said about the future of psychedelics and what can we expect. So one thing that I read in the microdosing guidebook was talking about how what we may be able to expect with where research is not having the entourage effect. So there's the psilocybin, but then what is potentially going to be legalized is the psilocin extracted. So
psilocin.
And it's interesting because, there are so many gummies for sale. You can walk in different shops and like buy the mushroom gummies or the mushroom chocolates now. And a lot of people say, yes, I feel great on them, but I don't have the visuals. So this has made me wonder. I'm like, is this what I read in the book talking about the psilocin being extracted? So it's a much more mild experience. It's still typically a great experience. You feel awesome and you still reap the benefits of that neuroplasticity, but it's not psilocybin. So what do you think about the difference, like psilocybin versus psilocin?
Yeah, I think that topic is still highly debated in literature.
Yeah.
Because we talked a little bit about neuroplasticity, but the mechanism of the neuroplasticity is still a little unknown. Okay. So, you digest mushrooms, it's the psilocybin that gives you this effect, and it's converted to psilocin, and that chemical binds to the serotonin receptors in your brain, right? And the degree at which the serotonin receptors are binded against is the degree of the psychedelic effect that you're feeling, right? So if you're tripping really hard, that means you have a lot of binding going on with serotonin. If you're not tripping so hard, there's less binding going on. Yeah. And so kind of the argument is, does the healing come from the trip itself, right? Like you're having this realization and you're being told something in this visual way that's like really going to stick with you because it's imprinting into your mind. Yeah. Or is it coming from just the chemical aspect of the drug? And so that it's like kind of a hard thing to debate about. Yeah. Because with microdosing, you can't really do a clinical trial with microdosing because it's such a small dose and there's so many factors that go into it. There's no way to isolate it, right? You do a microdose, but then there's all these variables in someone's life that you can't isolate just the drug like you could with a high dose in a clinical setting. Yeah, that's really interesting. So thank you for clarifying that. I figured that it's probably something that is still debated heavily because just being that I read it in the book, and the book was recently published, and he was referring to what's to come in the future. Yeah. And we're not there yet, so it's going to be interesting to see. I do want to go back. You mentioned a little bit about your childhood and losing your mother, and I think that is also what helps us connect easier too, is both of us having lost a parent. I explain it to people like it's like you graduate to a different version of reality, not in a bad way. I'm not saying that what happened to our parents wasn't bad, but I'm saying like
when these bad things happen, it's almost sometimes, or trauma happens, it's sometimes like you mentally advance. And why, I feel like I'm not giving the best description of that, or it's almost like you, because a piece of you has been taken away, you just see life through a different lens. And that can be defined or categorized by you. It's your choice. You can either choose to see it great, like, oh my gosh, this life is so short. Like, I lost a loved one. Like, they would want me to squeeze all of the juice out of this lemon that life is offering me. But some people go down a bad road. And I'm not saying everything doesn't happen for a reason. It does. We have these different periods of life, these trial and error periods. I always say, like, throw everything like a noodle and let's see if it sticks. If it sticks, yes. If not, keep moving forward. What do you think was like a defining moment as a child, or an inflection point that, like, when you think about this memory, it almost like just, you can feel your inner child within, and you're like, hey, you're still here and I got you.
Yeah. I do want to say one thing before I say that is the interesting thing about trauma at a young age is when they do studies about trauma, because you mentioned, people can have two different outlooks depending on how it happens. What's very like a defining factor for how someone, grows out of trauma is like the social capital they have after the traumatic experience. So if someone has a traumatic experience and they have good social capital, they have friends and family that are there supporting them, they can do very well. They like turn into a whole new person. They have a slump, but they rise like a phoenix, versus if you don't have like a strong social capital, those people are more inclined to kind of go down a bad path, get addicted to things, and just their life kind of goes down a whole different path. So I want to give that a little bit of like life, because I think that's important for people. If you have someone going through a rough time, give them space, but make sure, there's support there for them. Back to the defining moment. It's very interesting you brought up that question, because going back to another psychedelic trip I had, I was listening to, I don't know if you know Fred again, the artist.
Sounds kind of familiar.
One of my favorite artists. So I was such a good artist. So I was tripping. I was listening to his music, and I love to dance. I absolutely love dancing. And so I'm, listening to his song and just like vibing and dancing. And I'm like having this like visual experience that I'm at a music festival and I'm like dancing by myself, and there's like no one around me, right? Everyone's kind of like off to the side and the crowd's there. And I have this realization that like no one really understands what I've been through in my life. So it's okay to dance. Just dance because you can. And
that's beautiful.
And that was my inner child coming out, because ever since I was a kid, I danced all the time. I like taught myself how to dance, was on a dance team in high school, and I kind of stopped doing that. And so that was an example of, thinking about my inner child, and it came out, and, there was a moment definitely in my childhood where I had this, like, dancing is for me. Like, I love dancing. And
like, dance because you can. I love that quote, because, I mean, fact of the matter is you are so blessed to be able to dance. And that is probably, I'm just having this thought, that's probably really put in perspective to you specifically after serving overseas, and probably seeing some people, friends even, people you're close with, come back missing limbs and not be able to dance like they once did. So that's so interesting that dancing for you is something that's so special, near and dear to your heart. And you're cognizant of, I'm going to do this because I can, and I'm going to have fun with it. And I want to ask you too, because you've talked about some of your trips and the visuals you see. You mentioned to me one time, when you do it from home, put on like nice music, a sleep mask, and like lay in your bed for it. When you're having these visuals, specifically like the maze, was that with a sleep mask on?
Yeah, that one was not with a sleep mask on. So I was laying in my bed for that one.
Okay.
That was like a really high dose for that substance, or for that trip. But that, I just closed my eyes on that one, and then it was just very, very intense, running through a maze, and it was very interesting, because like you're really trying to get out of this maze, and you feel like it feels so real to you, you know. And I think when
The maze of your mind.
yeah, and I think when you're on these substance, the brain has a hard time telling the difference between like reality and like what's real and what's not. And so that's why, like, if you're daydreaming or you're thinking about like a past experience, your physiological body, like the blood pressure, the heart rate, that all starts responding like you're going through that experience again. And so I think that's going back to like the highly debated topic of why the visual experience can be very important for the trip, because it allows a very vivid life experience to happen.
That's really interesting that you say that. Yeah, and I want to experience more with like closing my eyes, because I shared with you that I do them a lot in nature because I like to see like the plants actually breathing. And people are often scared of like, I don't want to see dragons and fire and, you know, all these things. I'm like, you see what is physically there, because that scared me too at first. I mean, I remember the first night I did them, seeing these grids in the sky, to later find out that that's called geography of the universe, and it's something that's physically there. We're just capable of seeing it. I wanted to ask you one more question too, just before we get off the topic of psilocybin. Do you think that like astral, is it called astral projection or astral projecting?
I'm not quite sure.
Okay, I just was gonna share, like, for the past couple of years of really immersing myself in experimenting with psilocybin, I go to these crazy places in my dreams, and, you know, someone described dreaming as like your spirit is basically like a balloon with a string, and when you sleep, your body stays in the bed, but you can go to different dimensions, different places. You can travel all over, but you're still connected to that string. And when you start to wake up, that balloon is being reeled back in all the way. Your soul's being reeled back into your body. And for the past couple of years, like when I go into that deep REM sleep, I have a very hard time. Like, sometimes it can take a couple of minutes, and it's really scary, but I wake up and I'm like, come on, remember what year it is. Come on, what do you have to do to like, it really just, it's like, it takes me a little bit to fully come back from wherever I just was, which is trippy and makes this seem like the Matrix a little bit. Have you experienced anything like that?
Yeah, I can't say that I have. I would say you'd probably be interested in looking into like lucid dreaming. And seeing things like that. I don't have a strong background in that. I know sleep is such a fascinating area in neuroscience, because it's just trying to understand what sleep is, because like I said, the brain doesn't truly know the difference between reality and dreaming. And so there's this kind of like weird overlap, because you have like daydreaming, which is like hallucination in some ways, and then sleep dreaming, which is also hallucination in some way. And then we can talk. We should do another podcast where I go into like how what we see in the world is actually hallucination and not reality.
Oh my God.
We're not passively we're not passively collecting the world like we think we are. It's actually being constructed in our brain.
I would love to go more into that. I want to ask you, who inspires you most and why? Or maybe not most, maybe just in this moment. Who do you presently feel inspired by?
You know, I get this question a lot. I think it's hard. I don't think I'm inspired by one person. I think I'm inspired by the stories of many different people. And I think that to me is very inspirational. So I love talking to new people, hearing their stories and hearing kind of what they've been through and where they want to go in their life. And that inspires me to kind of keep going. I think the other day I was in Denver and I was walking around, and on Sundays I like to, you know, give food to homeless people. And I was talking to this one guy named Matt, and he was talking about, you know, schizophrenia and his struggle with schizophrenia, and his roommate struggled with it. And the state of Colorado does a great job of trying to help homeless people, and they gave them free medication. But then his roommate refused to take the medication because he just didn't trust the government. And that was like eye-opening for me, because a lot of times when we're studying how we can help homeless people, we focus on mental health. But then it's like, you know, you can get this medicine that's revolutionary, but if someone doesn't trust the government, then they're not going to take it. And so that inspired me to understand more, how can we get people to trust the institution? How can we get people to trust medicine? How can we get people to trust science? And so now like the classes I'm taking this semester are geared towards policy and things of that nature. So I would say my motivation comes from people around me.
Yeah, I love that. And you are such a people person, and you're an incredible listener.
So are you.
Thank you. So I love that you're just inspired by the army of people that you have around you, because it really seems like you have incredible people around you. You're always visiting someone cool. Like every time we talk, you're like, I'm here. I'm like, oh, I aspire to be just like you. Rub off on me a little bit. Okay, I want to ask you, what is a major red flag of yours, whether that be dating and friendships or just in life?
Yeah, major red flag. Okay, if I give a red flag, then I have to also give a green flag.
Okay, I like that.
I think they have to be counterbalanced between
yin and
the two. Yeah, yin and yang. So a red flag for me is probably someone who isn't very, I don't want to say like not open-minded, but they're very like stuck in a certain mindset.
Yeah.
And they aren't open to new ideas, not open to new experiences. And I think, the world is constantly changing and we have to constantly adapt. And so when I see someone who's kind of stuck in that way, for me, I know that's not someone I can, spend most of my time around, because I think there's like two types of people, right? Let me slow down a bit. I think most of us, like, what we've done in our life right now is a reflection of what we know is possible for us. Yeah. Right. And so most of us live our lives in like our personal history instead of like an imagination. And so we just kind of live life doing what we know we can do. And we don't really push ourselves using our imagination. Yeah. And for me, I feel like I need to be surrounded by people that have a little bit of realism, that kind of bring me back down to reality. Like, hey, Bernie, like realism here, but are also willing to push and be imaginative and like push what we know to be reality a bit. Yeah, almost like head in the clouds, feet on the ground, feet in the grass, head in the clouds. I think that's what I say. Something like that. Yeah. And then for the green flag, I think just like intellectual like stimulation, like love to read books, love to learn new things, kind of the exact opposite of the red flag. No, I love that. And I needed to hear that today. And that's why I love doing this so much, is it's just almost like my guests and my friends answer questions that I'm kind of seeking from within and asking my heart, like, are these certain things okay with me? And then it's like, I pray for discernment and wisdom, and then it's often through other people that I get the answers, which is really cool. Yeah. So what would be your red flag and green flag? Red flag and green flag. Gosh, that's really hard. Right? Off of the top of my head. I'm like, I thought about these questions, not about the answers though. I guess maybe a red flag, just in this moment, I keep having the word inconsistency flash across my brain. And I think inconsistency in a sense of, I love this quote. It's just, if it ain't a hell yes, it's a hell no. Just inconsistency in making you question, what is this? What are we doing? Is this a waste of my time? I think if you even have to question things because of inconsistency, the answer is probably no. Green flag, consistency. The green flags always match the red flags. You're right. No, but for real, green flag, I think someone who is able to exude not only sympathy but empathy, because sympathy is, hey, I hear you, I'm here for you. Yeah. But empathy is like, hey, I'm gonna come down there in that hole with you and sit with you. Wow. Yeah. A lot of people that have sympathy, they aren't really, they're like, oh, you're hurting, I don't want to feel that hurt, but like, I'm here for you. But empathy is like, no, like, I'm here for you. And gosh. I think you really realize that. Like, that, for me, it was losing my dad. I don't know if you resonate with that, with losing your mom, but you really realize like who makes you, the personality types that make you feel safe and the ones that don't. I want to ask you before we wrap things up, what do you think the best life lesson that you learned in your 20s was, and what advice do you have to give to the
younger generation or just anyone?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm really glad you asked that, because I was going to say something to what you just said, and it actually happens to be the same answer.
Oh, I love that.
So I think one of the biggest things I've learned that I keep with me today is that surround yourself with people whose eyes light up when they see you coming.
Aww.
And I think that's so important, because people who do that exude empathy.
Yeah.
Those are the people who are going to be there fighting in the trenches with you when you hit rock bottom. They're going to be right there scraping you off the ground, or like digging in the dirt with you, you know what I mean? Because it's just something about that.
Yep.
So that's something that I think I've learned. It's been hard, because sometimes I surround myself with the wrong people, and you have to learn to find those particular people.
Yeah.
And so I would say that's also like the advice I would give people is like, you know, just surround yourself with really great people and people that dream, you know, like really surround yourself with people who can dream and just like push you to your limit. Sometimes maybe it's a little uncomfortable. Growth is very uncomfortable. Like I tell people all the time, like you have no idea how outside of my comfort zone my life really is. It may not seem like it. Yeah.
Because I would have never known.
Oh yeah. So much anxiety, and I just push myself. I have friends that are there like, hey, let's go. We got this. We can do this. So
I love that. God, that's so incredible. Where is one place you would love to travel?
Oh, I think you know the answer to that.
Greece.
Greece, for sure, Greece.
Yes, oh my gosh. We got to plan something.
Yes, I am a sucker for good photography and good like spots. And so I see so many good photos of Greece, and I'm like, man, I would love to go do some portrait photography there. Just like the mountains, the water. So,
oh my God. Yeah, I'm like geeking out over that too. See, and for me, it's like the videography, like, oh my God, the vlog that I could make by going to Greece. Oh my God.
The water, the mountains.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
What is your spirit animal, if you had to pick one?
If I had to pick one, this might be a little off the beaten path, but I would say a dragon.
Oh, I love that. I can see you as a dragon.
Thanks. Fire sign. Let's go.
Yeah.
I say a dragon because dragons are usually, you know, a little bit mysterious, kind of magical. And for me, that really mystical kind of ties to like my imaginative nature, right? Where I always try to push myself, live through my imagination. Dragons are also very protective, you know, like I protect my tribe deeply, you know, I'd spent a lot of time in the military, spent a lot of time overseas. And that was a completely different version of me, very violent version of me. Wow. But learning to turn that off, right? And be gentle and be courageous and be there to protect my tribe. But if I need to turn it on, I can turn it on, you know?
You'll blow that fire breath when needed.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, well, that's so incredible. I love that so much. I think that asking people that is always so much fun. Yeah. But as we wrap up for today, guys, where can the audience find you on social media? Yeah,
so you can find me on Instagram, Rogue Villain. It's my DJ and photography persona. But yeah, I'm on Instagram.
So at Rogue Villain.
Yep, at Rogue Villain.
Nice. And that'll be linked in the description too as well, you guys. Anyways, thank you all for being here today. And thank you, Bernie, for coming on. We finally did it. I feel so accomplished right now. I'm so happy that this wasn't, you know, nothing got in the way of this. Not even my car troubles I experienced earlier, because this has just been an incredible time with you. So thank you. Thank you all for being here. Until next time, stay bloomy brained.